Today, we're going to cut through all the hype and all the noise to see what the data actually has to say about caffeine and your workout. We're just going to follow the numbers and find out if that pre-workout coffee is a true performance enhancer or maybe just a placebo.
So here's the big question, right? Does that cup of coffee you drink every morning really supercharge your workout? It's something people have wondered about for decades. But today, we're not interested in stories or what some guy at the gym said. Nope. We want a definitive, data-backed answer, and we're going to get it by looking at the best scientific evidence out there.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the main question. Then we'll decode the data on strength. After that, we'll analyze the endurance edge. Then we'll get into the practical stuff, dose, habit, and even perception. And finally, we'll lay out the final data-driven verdict. Let's get into it.
All right, first up, strength. Can a little caffeine actually make you stronger? Well, let's go straight to the numbers and find out.
Now, before we get to the juicy results, you got to understand where this information comes from. We are not just looking at one or two small studies here. We're looking at what's called a meta-analysis. Think of it as the gold standard. It's a powerful tool that combines the results from dozens of different studies to find the true overall effect. This is about as solid as evidence gets.
Okay, so here it is. The big, top-line finding from a huge meta-analysis of 27 different studies. The overall effect size, or ES, is 0.19. Now, in the world of statistics, that's considered a small effect. But, and this is the important part, it is a very real and statistically significant benefit for your maximal strength. The data confirms it. Caffeine gives you a little strength boost.
But wait, that overall number, it doesn't really tell the whole story. Because here's where it gets really, really interesting. When you start digging into the data, you find that this effect isn't the same for every muscle in your body. It's actually surprisingly specific.
And this chart just illustrates that perfectly. Take a look. The benefit is almost all concentrated in the knee extensors, your quads. They show a much bigger effect size of 0.37. To put that in perspective, that's about a 7% improvement. But for all the other muscle groups they tested, the effect basically vanished. It wasn't statistically significant. So it looks like caffeine is a leg day specialist.
This is so specific. It just begs the question, right? How is this happening? If it's not making every single muscle stronger, then what is actually going on here? Well, the data gives us a huge clue.
And the answer seems to be in your head, literally. It's your brain, not just your muscles. This number, an effect size of 0.67, shows a pretty big increase in muscle activation when you're pushing for a maximal contraction. So what that tells us is that caffeine is likely working on your central nervous system, basically allowing your brain to send a stronger go signal to your muscles.
Okay, so we've seen what the data says about pure strength. But what about endurance? Let's analyze the evidence and see if caffeine can help you push past your limits.
And looking at another huge meta-analysis of 23 studies, we see a familiar story. There's a clear beneficial effect. The overall effect size for muscular endurance comes in at 0.28. Just like with strength, this is considered a small but definitely significant improvement. So yep, the data confirms it. Caffeine helps you go for longer.
But again, the details really, really matter. To understand the endurance data, we have to know how scientists even measure it. They mostly use two types of tests. There are open endpoint tests, which is basically exercising until you absolutely cannot continue. And then there are fixed endpoint tests, where you exercise for a set amount of time, like 30 minutes. And this difference is crucial.
And here is why that distinction matters so much. The data shows caffeine's benefit just shines in those open endpoint tests, the ones where you're just going until total exhaustion. In those cases, the improvement is a massive 18%. It seems like caffeine is at its best when it's helping you push past what you thought your limits were.
So we've confirmed it works for strength and it works for endurance. That brings us to the really practical side of things. We're going to look at the best dose, whether your daily coffee habit makes a difference, and how caffeine can actually change how you perceive effort. Let's get into it.
The research is actually super consistent on this. The sweet spot, according to the data, is 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine for every kilogram you weigh. So for a 154-pound person, that's around 210 to 420 milligrams. We're talking about 2 to 3 standard cups of coffee taken about an hour before you work out. And what's really important is that the data shows that taking more than this doesn't mean you get bigger benefits.
All right, now for the million-dollar question. For those of us who, can't function without our morning coffee. Does building up a tolerance cancel out the benefit? Well, this quote from a 2017 study just says it all.
They're dispelling the myth. The research is pretty clear that even if you drink coffee every single day, you still get that performance-enhancing effect. So you don't need to quit coffee to get the boost.
You know, this might be the most fascinating, kind of weird finding of all. Caffeine actually messes with your perception of effort. The data shows that you can produce more power, you can go faster, all while your brain is telling you that you're trying just as hard as you would without it. So you're objectively working harder, but it doesn't feel harder. And these graphs just show it plain as day. Look at the vertical axis. That's power output. The solid line, that's the athletes who took caffeine. The dashed line is the placebo group. You can see it, right? At every single point, the caffeine group is producing way more power, even though both groups were told to work at the exact same perceived effort level. It's like a free performance boost.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground and we've looked at a lot of numbers. So let's pull it all together into one final data-driven verdict and just summarize the biggest takeaways from our deep dive. So here's the bottom line, based entirely on the data. First, caffeine gives you a small but very real boost to both your strength and your endurance. And that strength effect, it's most powerful in your legs. Second, the way it works is mainly through your central nervous system. Your brain can just push your muscles harder. Third, the ideal dose is 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram. And finally, your daily coffee habit, it doesn't seem to cancel out these awesome benefits.
So there you have it. The numbers are clear. Caffeine is a proven, it's a reliable, and it's a legal performance enhancer. So really, the only question left is for you. Now that you know what the data says, how are you going to approach your next workout?